Hey, world builders, welcome back to Shoutout Saturday, where I read your lore. This is number 27. If you want to hear your own writing read aloud here, come submit some for the daily prompt in the Discord and tag it for Shoutout Saturday, and it should be read here. Now, let's read some lore. For day 271, the prompt was, what's a common ghost story in your world? Something told that perhaps holds truth and perhaps does not. Nugget writes, The Wild Hunt, an entry in Petrichor. One of the most popular ghost stories, or perhaps myths, in Petrichor is that of the Wild Hunt. Over time, it's merged with the holiday Lumenvale, but it originated as a general winter folktale. During the winter months, a barrage of ghosts and spirits, and an eternal undead hunt led by a spirit wearing all black and riding a pale horse. They ride through the streets of Petrichor, hunting and chasing any souls that failed to reach the Garden of the Decayed, and sweeping up those unfortunate enough to be caught in its path. It's described as invisible, yet very loud with the wails and cries of the hunt. Generally speaking, mimicking the cries of the hunt can go one of two ways. Either they'll appreciate your enthusiasm and will leave you some of what they hunted, or you simply get their attention and you don't want their attention. There are many stories about the hunt leader, usually resulting in the message to stay out of the hunt's way, but just as many about them giving gifts to those who deserve it. The most common of these are stories about the hunt leader asking for help to repair something or an impossible task, and if they succeed, they'll leave gold or dark chocolate as a reward. Cool. I remember hearing about the Wild Hunt stuff from you, Nugget, at one point for Petrichor, but nice to have something written down. For day 272, the prompt was, what is an example of a police force in your world? Does it have any professional forces? Perhaps the classic hue and cry? Or is there a paramilitary force? Why do they do it that way? And this comes from Maple May in the Discord. Carhop writes, Acquisitors, an entry in Solitaire, which is a new solar punk entry, I believe, by Carhop that he started world building for. And I think there is one other entry in the Shoutout Saturday in this setting, and I'm excited to get into this. Acquisitors. Ararak Mupo Matitiliku. Who here knows what that means? Photon Dradus asked the assembled company of young soldiers. His uniform, a stark affair of white fabric and nanomesh decorated with black service cords and a litany of golden service medals, seems to dim the starched graduate uniforms of the cadets in front of him. Their fresh faces stare blankly back at his own weathered visage, their black hover boots polished to the point that the vinyl and metal are indistinguishable at first glance, shuffle amidst the silence. One cadet clears his throat while another chokes out a giggle. Pathetic. Not a single one of you knows the meaning of our creed. I shall send you all back to basic. Dradus' snarl is quiet, controlled, and distant. The fury in his good eye is anything but. The cadets all stand to attention, several beginning to stammer out an answer. To ensure equality of resources, sir, one named Sullivan finally blurts out, blinking away a bead of sweat that had rolled into his eye. From the compact of the collective Acquisitors, Sullivan, Dradus sighs, pinching the bridge of his nose. And why, Sullivan, do we take our creed from the compact? Because, sir, it establishes our charter. Sullivan smiles, relieved to know the answer to this question. He'd hate for his own uncle to have to redress him, especially on a matter this important to their family. The Dradus clan have always been members of the Acquisitors, after all. And further, sir, our entire mission is predicated upon the compact. Very good, Sullivan. Now, can anyone else tell me what our mission is? The photon crosses his arms, scanning the group of hunch-shouldered young soldiers in front of him. One seems to begin to raise her hand and quickly pulls it down as her companions dig an elbow into her rib. Acquisitor Mackenzie, speak. Acquisitor Prosperia, you're on dish duty after supper. The elbow thrower begins to balk, but is quickly cut off with a stern grunt from the photon. We do not silence our brothers and sisters unless they speak falsely. You know this, daughter. Father and daughter share a cordial glare before his gaze softens and turns to Mackenzie. Speak, child. Sir, our mission is a simple one, yet demands much of us, sir. Mackenzie, a pale woman with a vocal tremor, begins. We are to ensure that no one on the continent hoards energy, solar, thermal, wind, or otherwise. We are to ensure the usage of coal and oil are limited to permitted groups and projects only as approved by the Energy Council. She coughs, sputtering over the words, flushing a deep pink as several sets of eyes roll at her or glare pointedly. And finally, sir, we are to reprimand and remove from society any who would violate the compact to serve their own interests, sir. Very good, Acquisitor Mackenzie. Now, in simpler terms, for those lacking your mind, a fatherly grin tickles the edge of his lips, but the photon does not fully commit to the smile. We slay dragons, sir. Very cool. Very neat start to this setting, the Solitaire setting. I'm a big fan of solar punk stuff, and I'm excited to read some more from Carhop on this. I think this is a pretty cool start. We don't know much yet, but we know there's dragons, and we like dragons here. From the Great writes, fear the law and entry in rust and blood, specifically turmoil. Caldatha is at war. Its people are scared and order must be upheld. Whether to keep enemies at bay or to upkeep an illusion of control, military checkpoints, ID inspections, random traffic stops. The enemy is within and without. There is no room for protective laws, only the judgment of those in power. Patrolmen walk the streets with lethal weapons. They stop whomever they please, for whatever reason they want. They need no motive nor warrant to demand entry to a home. To the average citizen, a patrolman holds absolute power, judge, jury, and executioner, as they must react in the best way they can to enemies that defy death. The extreme force with which they persecute intruders, spies, or other ne'er-do-wells is notorious among citizens of Caldatha, with countless riots being started because a single unnamed patrolman shot an innocent person on their walk home from work, or maybe they did kill a COR member, but nobody believes the report. These riots, too, are an extreme danger to the order of Caldatha and are met with corrective force. Riots often end in screams nowadays. Early on in the war, they were disbanded peacefully, but war is demanding. Soldiers and patrolmen cannot be devoted to such things for long. The vigilance required of them forces them to make grave decisions with these distractions. As such, riots, as rare as they are nowadays, always end in blood. Worker strikes kill thousands of soldiers. Riots disrupt businesses to fund foundries and workshops. Lethal force, or the threat of it, is the fastest way to ensure cooperation among citizens. They may have their own rifles or shotguns, but every city has a steam crawler capable of wiping out hundreds in seconds. There is no room for dissidents in war, and thus no cause for patrolmen to cease their oppression. There is hope, though, for a better future. King Robert Caldethi has seen fit to include a contingency plan to fix the force after the war ends. Whether he lives to see it or not, all active patrolmen, veteran or recruit, are to immediately be removed from the force and replaced with retrained individuals. This change will theoretically solve the issue, but seneschals and advisors fear that this may invite discord with the temporary absence of an undertrained patrolman. Cool. I like getting more of Caldatha. I feel like the interior of Caldatha is always interesting to me. We have this very oppressive government system, but it's like at the same time kind of seems like not the worst place to be in turmoil, with all the other horrific things going on. Like, I mean, it probably would be better to be in here than a citizen, than a member of Ragash, I suppose. For day 273, the prompt was, how often do people bathe in your world? What is the preferred method/location? Now, there were no prompts at the time of getting all of this, so I put in one of my own, like I said I would start doing last week. So I wrote, bathing, an entry in Etovia. Those Etovians found in the major nations of the continent are very fond of their baths. For the poor, communal bathing areas are commonplace, especially in cities where a kind, sundered priest can be found to regularly cleanse water and the dirty sediment layer be removed on a nearly weekly basis. Communal bathing's modesty and co-ed practices varies highly by region and culture, but they can be found everywhere and often as an attraction for the higher class and wealthy elite. Such bathhouses are generally fully enclosed with elaborate interiors with a number of servants or bathhouse employees to look after their guests and cater to their experience. Most self-respecting taverns host a number of rooms which include private baths that may be heated via metacircle at the cost of a chip upcharge relative to the actual siphon flow cost. Grand baths with elaborate heating mechanisms are popular among the richest few in the world, such as can be found in the Visar court, and though many serve the patrons there, few will experience receiving such luxury. Bathing is steeped in Etovian history, connected to safety and purity, the avoidance of fresh water sources when in a compromised state, and the removal of potential disease still attributed to asthenia. Both serve as a way to improve and protect your loved ones and the social structure around you at large. This very positive social and emotional association can be felt in all ages and ethnic backgrounds, even among the more distant lands. The Yudi of Strana Giganta build large snow-packed wooden pens sealed with plavatel fat, which they sit in and melt to get a pure bath. The Geravgel are one of the only outliers, as their daily time spent in the safe oceans of the Garavian archipelago have left them culturally devoid of a specific bathing time, place, infrastructure, or traditions. For day 274, the prompt was, are there costumes in your world? What kind, and what purpose do they serve? Again, when I was grabbing all of these submissions, I did not see one for 274, so I just jumped mine in, which is a short one. And I wrote Ged Hora, the Hora being this group of traveling people. Usually there are around 4 of these, and they each have a different name and specialize in different areas. Ged in Abaki is said to derive from the word for costume, but more notably, known for its other possible meaning, betrayal. The Ged Hora specialize in elaborate costumes used to represent legendary historical figures, often physically large figures for which they attempt to match the descriptions as closely as possible to the legends. Some of the larger costumes require more than one member of the Hora to move about and operate properly. This, along with a member to tell legends and myth about the character in question, means that the Gerhora has and needs the most members of any of the four. They rotate costumes per location as the need for repair often arises after only a single use, thanks to the general complexity of each outfit. For day 275, the prompt was, how are human rights treated in your world? And this comes from The Wanderer in the Discord. Now, 3 days in a row, I couldn't find any. I'm really hoping I didn't miss some. I sorted by Shoutout Saturday as I always do, and I did not see any for 273, 4, or 5, I believe. And so here, again, is my entry for day 275, which is the 3 freedoms. This is specifically Pafsitos. Draconos do not have rights, so to speak. The idea is a bit incongruous to the foundations of their society, and instead, the Draconos of the Fos have been given 3 freedoms outlined by Hikari herself. All other aspects of a Draconos' life are at the whims of the great mechanisms of the Fos world. The freedom to love. Draconos who are not assigned to the breeding pods are free to choose mates at their leisure. While no official binding ceremony exists, some of the larger trench towns have their own little rituals to celebrate such a choice, which rarely involve much extravagance or complexity. The freedom to choose. Once a Draconos is assigned their position, they are permitted to change where they work that position at will. At will, in this case, does of course mean with a proper procedure and paperwork. Bids of choice can take significant time to process, but they all do eventually come back. If a Draconos wields their end of the bureaucracy correctly, then their bid of choice is accepted no matter what. The freedom to die. If the Luvi Palimos is too much for a Draconos, they are permitted to act rashly or take matters into their own hands for the purpose of removal of their own life. If the choice in question has the potential to significantly harm or endanger other Draconos around them, they may be stopped and properly punished. For day 276, the prompt was, is there a unique way in which a ruler is selected in your world? Nugget writes, so you want to be a church head, an entry in Petrichor. The church heads are the highest religious power in Petrichor and as such hold extensive control over the entire city. But how does one attain this power? Theoretically, any member of the first estate or clergy can become a church head regardless of rank or how long they've been ordained. That being said, it's up to the high vicars to decide who becomes the next church head, and it's extremely rare for them to appoint someone who isn't already in their own ranks. The high vicars act as advisors to the church heads and are often the only members of the church with whom they regularly interact. When a church head dies or retires, the high vicars will lock themselves in the Grand Arch Cathedral to discuss who will replace them. This discussion and subsequent vote can take anywhere from a few hours to several weeks. Upon their decision, they will bring the candidate to the remaining church heads who will partake in one final vote as to whether or not their ideals align. If more than half reject them, the process of the high vicars restarts until the vote passes. Upon the church heads agreeing on the new head, they will swear themselves to the gods in a private ritual to become a vessel to their respective god. They are cleansed, drowned, and bled, and eventually made to willingly remove a piece of themselves with a sacred dagger before taking part in communion of the holy blood. They are now a church head. They are now a vessel to pass the will of their weeping gods. Very cool. I love religious figure replacement, the whole process. I mean, you think about like IRL with the Pope and everything. How we kind of reflect things like that in our world building is always interesting to me. Well done, Nugget. For day 277, the prompt was, do names and their meanings have significance in your world? What are some examples? And this comes from Nugget in the Discord. And Nugget writes, what's in a name? A time traveler / Petrichor entry. More meta discussions about my writing as a whole. The gods in Time Traveler and the Immortal forget their names after they die and are rebuilt. Stella renames them upon their reincarnation. As such, the gods' names tend to be very literal in terms of their domains. Vida and Mors translate literally to life and death. Zephyr means breezy, Stella means the stars, etc., and you'll never guess what time is the god of. Emrys's name is also very literal, and fun fact, Aurelius isn't actually his last name, it's his given name. He was born before last names were commonplace. Though the gods generally have multiple names, Aurelius, his given name, means golden one, in reference to the specks of gold in his hair, but can also be interpreted to mean the light of the sun, which is the interpretation he tends to lean towards to spite Stella. He changed his name several times around the war as he was rather unpopular and kept getting run out of various towns. He eventually landed on renaming himself Emrys, meaning immortal. It's like the name of the series. As one final act of spite against the gods, a way of saying, you cannot kill me, I'm still here. The gods are generally referred to with various epitaphs, Mors being known as guard dog, the one who receives many guests, the final king, Stella as the omnimatter or the all-mother, and Aurelius commonly referred to as star child, one of his least favorites, the blade which will slaughter the gods, he who stole the sun's light, or most simply the dreaded sunlight. Petrichor has an emphasis on status and bloodlines. The second estate's value in themselves is almost less about having money, but more about their names and their blood having an inherent value over the commonwealth. The noble houses, such as the Lockharts or the Vane family, carry a lot of weight with their surnames, almost caring more about their name than the individuals. I lied, they definitely care more about the house name than the individuals. A decent amount of Ambrose's eventual madness is because he couldn't bear the idea of his name being buried with him. The second estate also tends to have very long names as a sign of status. On the other side, people who lack any kind of second name are seen as having less worth. Most people in the third estate do still have surnames, but many don't. Serfs and vagrants are often very unlikely to have last names, reinforcing how they're the bottom of the barrel in petrichor society, and particularly how serfs are seen more as a property of their masters than actual people. Abandoned children and orphans are another tragically common occurrence who lack any kind of family ties or last names. Edward and Thaddeus are two such people, with Edward being found at the doorstep without any name whatsoever, though later marrying a Lockhart name, and Thaddeus being the child of a serf who wouldn't have a last name anyway. Cool general coverage on Petrichor and Time Traveler and the Immortal and the power of names or the meaning behind the names that Nugget has going on here. For day 278, the prompt was, are there spies in your setting? If so, how does one do their operations? And this comes from Aris in the Discord. The Wanderer writes, Order of the Shadows versus the Cold Bloods. There are a large variety of espionage organizations within Endrin, and they all tend to operate differently. The Order of the Shadows is a Paragon-adjacent organization. However, it has multiple factions within its order. It's built upon the philosophy that threats to the world, dangers, and hostile organizations need to be stopped before the rest of the world fully takes notice. They recruit by word of mouth, with members seeking out people they think would be a good fit. If the person agrees, they're selected by a council that does an extremely in-depth background check on the person. They're also trained and tested for a month. If they pass the Fade, a challenge of stealth and espionage, over half usually fail. The largest group in this organization is the Grim Hollow Order, which has largely good intentions and more moral methods than most of the other orders, but still does morally dubious activities. There is another espionage order that is powerful in Endrin, that being the Cold Blood. While the Cold Blood is primarily an assassination order, they spy and gather intel as well. Since both orders' inception, they have been done everything in their power to wipe each other out. The Cold Blood has a reputation for making ruthlessly effective assassins and for killing people when they're very well protected, especially if you want to make a message. They don't recruit in a traditional method. They kidnap or purchase young children/orphans and raise them together as a family. They're trained in stealth, assassination, and torture for at a minimum of 6 hours a day. That leads to a very skilled youth in stealth. By the time they're adults, they are masters of their craft. At roughly 22 to 25, depending on skill, they'll take on their first missions and with success will strive taking down the Death Test, a ruthlessly dangerous mission assigned. If successful, they'll become undead wraiths. Interesting, very cool. Two sides of a similar coin here. One that's a little bit more reasonable, one that's quite a bit closer to a grim dark kind of concept. Now, Promo the Great writes, log report, an entry in Rust and Blood and Turmoil. However, I am going to let him read it. He submitted this along with his own recording, which he put a lot of work into, I could tell, and I'm just going to play that for you.
The following messages is that of a recording device belonging to an as-of-yet unnamed operative, tasked with retrieving objects of advantage and finding the location and identity of VIP number 1, also known as the Champion of Ragash. Log report number 36. Begin log. Morning. I started my morning trekking over the so-called Sea of Metal, as the soldiers refer to it as, also known professionally as Tangrave E-3. No sign of recent enemy or friendly activity, although there are numerous weathered instances of Seftor script, as well as numerous mundane cultist corpses in the area. Bright. I encountered a small force of cultists speaking in coded Seftor, unable to translate or record due to weather interference. The group remained in place during my time in proximity to them without event, roughly 4 hours, as I snuck past them. Evening. Arrived at target location, Bastion 56AU, and searched for the OOA. Search came up negative. OOA was either destroyed in the siege or claimed by enemy forces long ago. Bastion 56AU shows signs of extreme cultist activity, both COR and demonic in nature. Blast shadows of numerous people are present on the walls and floors, likely as a result of a greater demonic presence during the siege. During my examination, I made contact with hostiles, total count unknown. I hid until they passed successfully. End log. Log report number 37. Begin log. Morning. Uneventful as I proceeded to Hammer's Crossing. Bright. I passed through an abandoned cultist bivouac with signs of orcish presence and possible infighting. Evening. Uneventful. I have made camp for the night. End log. Log report 38. Begin log. Morning. An early plague storm forced me to take another route to Hammer's Crossing. I encountered and eliminated 9 orcs in long-range combat. No damage sustained. Ammunition reserves now critical. Bright. I was forced to retreat and hide from a cultist dreadnought, Model 4 Annihilator tank. I successfully evaded and disengaged after 3 hours of hiding from both the dreadnought and its accompanying squad. Hammer's Crossing is within view. Evening. Arrived at the outskirts of Hammer's Crossing. Heavy cultist presence, head count over 3,000. Engaging recall and protocols and analyzing area for VIP number 1. End log. Log report 39. Begin log. Bright. I spent my morning and most of Bright searching the immense conglomeration of cultists for VIP number 1. Individual is likely held within a central tent that gets numerous visitors. Since I begun my recon, 6 separate Seahulks have arrived and dropped off orcish forces from Atronum. Several other VIPs are also present in the area, being Guthor Blooddrinker, Sharash Man-Eater, Kunra Kingkiller, who I believe is Eritex, Herald of the Eternal, Arakran, the Beast of Brunsville, and the current suspected leader of the orcish forces, Gore. Evening. VIP number 1 has still not been sighted. End log. Log report number 40. Begin log. Morning. VIP number 1 possibly spotted. An arch cultist wearing far more ceremonial clothing, as well as being noticeably taller than all other cultists in the area. Roughly 15 feet tall. Signs of extreme celestial corruption present, and a great number of cultists reaching out to touch the armor of the VIP. Evidence seems to point to... Does he see me? Oh no. Bright. VIP confirmed. The rest of the entirety of the cultist camp descended upon my previous position. If I had not relocated, I would be dead. Or worse. I have fled the area, but I still believe I am being followed. I must vacate the area immediately.
Seize him immediately!
Oh, I need to run, now! Evening. I'm being pursued by numerous cultists as well as VIP number 1. I will be stashing this recording device in the wreckage of a steam crawler in the hopes that it will be found soon. The identity of the VIP is still uncertain, but they're here. I need to go. This recording device was found in the wreckage of a steam crawler near the now abandoned Hammer's Crossing. The operative who recorded it, or VIP number 1, have still not been found. No proper log of this operation can be found, likely out of either a failure to document the operation or redaction. Another expedition to locate VIP number 1 is to be commenced soon.
He did a great job. I had listened to that before, and I loved the little ambiance pieces and his kind of combinations of a few things here, and also, like, really well done with the immersive log report stuff. I think that, once again, that Predwin really enjoys this kind of thing, and it seems to be one of his strengths, and he did fantastic, and I appreciate him reading this. I didn't have to do it. I mean, I enjoy reading them, but I think it was cool that he wanted to participate a little bit more, and so there you go. Nugget writes, blackmail, an entry in Petrichor. Thaddeus didn't become a bartender simply because he enjoys a good drink. He collects blackmail on the second estate and has been known to overpour to loosen people's tongues. You'll be surprised how much information one can gather from talking to people after a few stiff drinks. He collects most of his information at the bar and the rest through his own investigations in his free time, but rarely was he outright invited to look for dirt. Yet here he was in the Vane estate, practically hired by the dame of the house to investigate the skeletons in the closet, specifically an illegitimate child born of an affair involving her father. If he had to be honest, he'd prefer such an open invitation on the Lockharts, but he wasn't going to complain. Credit where it was due, Thomas Vane certainly did a decent job at covering the specifics of his various affairs before his passing, but not decent enough. "Have you found anything?" Thalia asked. "Records of the staff working here are 30 to 40 years ago. We know most of Monsieur Vane's adultery was with servants." "Would that list children?" "I mean, I was considered an extension of my mother's employment." Thalia went silent. Thaddeus opened the records and began going through each of them, separating any women listed as having children or whose names matched letters they had seen previously. The records were sparse, as would be expected for serfs, but as Thaddeus predicted, birth records were attached almost as an extension of their mothers. A few children had surnames listed from their parents, but many didn't seem to have such a privilege. "Adeline," Thalia said, picking up a particularly thick file. Thaddeus looked up, hearing his mother's name. He doubted the odds that it was her. After all, without surnames, it was hard to tell, but his heart ached slightly, regardless. "Give it here." Thaddeus picked up the records and began looking through the listed information on Adeline. She was unmarried, started working for the Vanes in 1751. There were a few letters between her and Thomas, but Thaddeus was more interested in the attached piece of paper with the date September 29th, 1754. His birthday. He read the rest of the document and realized it was a birth certificate. Thaddeus Vane. Thaddeus instinctively gagged when he read it and handed it to Thalia, whose response was a similar one of disgust. "You're not... I can't be." Except he was. They spent the next 10 minutes chasing this thread and realizing that everything lined up and that Thaddeus was the illegitimate child of nobleman Thomas Vane. "This stays between us," Thalia eventually said after several minutes of stunned silence. "Finally, something I think we can agree on." Nice. This one to me feels like classic, like, saw that coming. Knew that was going to happen. I don't know. And in a good way, in a very good way. Like, you built up, Thaddeus' entire chunk of writing that I've read so far definitely kind of has an endpoint here of this kind of self-discovery and then, having to struggle with that for sure, right? So, very cool. Well done, Nugget. I think delivered well. For day 279, the prompt was, how important are titles in your world? Are they used in place of names? Do they use honorific titles or something else? And this comes from Maple Me in the Discord. The Wanderer writes, titles, names earned. Amongst many cultures, in Endrin is a tradition, dating in origins to the elves and being adopted by other sentient races. This is the bestowing of titles. Now these are two titles worth noting. The first is titles of position, e.g., Lord of the Southern Reaches, Prince of Biddlecrest, etc. There are positions, and while those positions often come with power or authority, they are just that, quite a bit generic. The titles are really just a position of power, nothing more. However, there are the titles that actually mean something, that being earned titles. Earned titles replace the surname of the person who earns them and will be a brand of honor or shame for the rest of their lives. There are only a few titles given out a year. These titles relate to a great feat accomplished by the person, a case in point being Artemis Blackfire. Artemis was considered a normal mage with a normal surname for his youth and the start of his adult life. However, when they summoned fire from the ground and slew an entire army inside a ruined city, those who survived and witnessed his awe-inspiring power told tales of his power. He was thus given the name Blackfire to represent the city he scorched. This leads to the final item about titles, that being, who gives them. Titles bestowed upon subjects of a nation need the monarch or leader to bestow the title. The way rulers can earn their title is by 3 or more either independent rulers agreeing to one. As such, titles are actually rare amongst high-ranking nobility. Titles will pass to children, however. An "eh" sound is added before the title to denote relation, but distance. If 2 individuals with titles produce a child, then the title bestowed by a greater authority or a combination is chosen. Interesting that the titles are passed down to children. That feels incongruous to a system of titles to me, but I kind of like this idea a little bit. You have this great accomplishment, Blackfire, and then your son is Ed Blackfire, which is kind of cool, denoting that you are the son of this great person, but the distance is there that no, you are not the same. But man, is that going to be tough to live up to. From the Great writes, titles in Moroccan, an entry in Rust and Blood, specifically Turmoil. The traditions of the true Mauritanians within turmoil are complex and alien to most, though one of them stands out as particularly simple, though still intriguing in a grim way. Archcultist titles. An archcultist is never truly a leader until they've acquired a title of their own. Titles aren't as simple as coming up with one. No, they must earn it through their actions or appearance. Some archcultists are named for their victories against a foe of great power. One such individual is Kunra Kingkiller, who earned his title by achieving victory in combat against a greater daemon in a game of chess. Others may acquire their name through their preferred method of combat or a notorious ritual they take after combat. Guthor Blooddrinker is famed for draining and consuming the blood of his victims, slitting their throats open and hanging their limp corpses above his gaping, mutilated maw. And some, the rarest lot, earn their titles directly from the will of the Lord of Flies themselves. These archcultists grant the highest echelon of command and power in COR military structure. Sharash Maneater was granted her title after entering the makeshift Colosseum in Hammered's Crossing and incapacitating 36 fighters before finally losing against the champion of Ragash himself. In honor of her vigor and compassion towards battle, the Lord of Flies granted her the title Maneater as a show of respect to a competent and worthy leader. Titles can sometimes conflict with that of another archcultists. In the 57th year of sovereignty, two separate cultists claimed the title of Warp Breaker. To solve this spat, the two archcultists endeavored to earn new titles from one another and show each other up. Some conflicts aren't solved as cordially as this, though. Most actually end in blood as the two warriors face off in a battle to determine the rightful bearer of a title. There's only one title that is outright shameful to be granted: blasphemous. This title is given to those who have betrayed the ways of Ragash, defying their Pain Lord either purposefully or by accident. Archcultists are impossible to kill permanently, even more so than their fellows. This title is a mark of shame they can never, ever escape. Cool. Always love the Ragash stuff. The Mauritanians are crazy and well written by you, Predwin. And I can imagine with all the internal mess that a member of Ragash is experiencing, that being then named blasphemous on top of that is like both sequences of your mind are now just messed up. For day 280, the prompt was, what is the distribution of fiat versus commodity money in your setting? What about bartering with neither? Now, again, I did not see a submission for day 280. Please let me know if I missed someone's. I am really hoping I haven't missed a bunch, but I really tried to look because of how many seem to be missing. Either way, I wrote the Great Metal Token, an entry in Shalush. The Great Metal ones trade in a strict fiat currency known as the Great Metal Token. It comes in 5 denominations, each denoted simply with its numerical position, the first being the Great Metal Token the first, and the final being the Great Metal Token the fifth. The Great Metal Token is the most valuable of the 3 fiat currencies present on Shalush thanks to the process involved in its minting. Whenever additional currency is required by the government of Steel, a request is sent to the makers of the token. This is a group of the Great Metal ones responsible for minting the little cubes known as the Great Metal Token, which are formed in the following way. A large tray with cube-shaped depressions, each deeper in dimension than the square opening, is taken by one of the makers of the token, and each space is seeded with a tiny piece of their biomechanical form. It is then incubated in a mated condenser and allowed to expand inside of the tray until each square is filled roughly halfway. The tray is then taken to a token presser which stamps a medalejo into each new token, which can be used to verify that token's authenticity by any one of the Great Metal ones. Sovereignty. The process of creating one of the Great Metal tokens is considered partially sacred, as the money used by the Great Metal ones is effectively imbued with the soul of one of their own kind. Though originally just seen as powerful in meaning, this has become a piece of religious dogma which pushes against the idea of any transaction in which one part does not include the Great Metal token. Barter and commodity currencies are all but considered a vice or corruption among the Great Metal ones and are not tolerated well. This makes it difficult for sojourners coming from either Nimble of the Sky or the Folk of Brilliant Mind, as their currency is not accepted at any exchange rate. To a more extreme legal degree, the Great Metal Token is also not permitted to leave the Great Metal One's nation. If found in possession of anyone attempting to leave their borders, it is confiscated, and the perpetrator's fate will be up to the Government of Steel's judiciary branch, the deciders of fate and order. For day 281, the prompt was, what is the most powerful generator in your world? And this comes from The Wanderer in the Discord. The Wanderer writes, the power of the Astari. There are many words for it, what an Astari uses to power their machinations. Amongst those names are ones such as cosmic rings, spirals of creation, and a newer one, galaxy. Now these galaxies are incomprehensibly vast, hundreds of billions of stars swirling in a primordial vast ring of countless worlds. Pulled together by the force of gravity, like a colossal water wheel, the Astari pull energy from it, sapping the majority of energy that could be there and slowing the movement down, leaving roughly 25% of that energy untouched. This has led to some discrepancies in those who study the stars, unexplained gravity in some places, and energy in others. It is a process that baffles even those as ancient as me. Now, one might ask, what does an Astari use their energy for? Well, everything. Making new planes of existence, sustaining and repairing themselves, powering machines so vast one would die of old age before discovering the exit. To beings as powerful and primordial as the Astari, one cannot hope to know all of their reasons. The Astari are the people that are sort of the highest level cosmic entities in your world, right? The Wanderer, because you've got Endrin being this kind of like flat plane sort of situation, but then the Astari are like existing in a more typical cosmos, it feels like. And I don't remember the relationship here 100%. But with the Great Rights, Power Complex AEP 43/F- Big Shirley, an entry in Rust and Blood or Turmoil. And I'm going to again let Bredwin read this aloud because Bredwin also sent this one in, and I think he did a good job here also.
Day 281. Rust and Blood. Power Complex AEP 43/F, aka Big Shirley. In the harsh, cold wastelands of Rayonis Gao, electricity keeps homes heated and shielded from the elements of the rime-laced lands. There are many power plants all across Turmoil, but the largest and most powerful of them all is here in Rayonis Gao. Power Complex Auxiliary Electrical Prime Station 43/F, also known as Big Shirley. Big Shirley is the largest and first nuclear power plant in Turmoil, granted to a now redacted scientist for free by Ophiax, the Winding Workshop. Big Shirley has a total capacity of 55,780 megawatts. From 0 to 100%, it takes roughly 4 days to charge completely. Big Shirley has a total of 5,000 workers that keep it functional, repaired, and most importantly, stable. In the 43rd year of sovereignty, a catastrophic meltdown occurred, resulting in around 12,000 deaths as the nuclear fallout of Big Shirley coated Rayonis Gao. This accident was quickly contained through the use of glyph magic and mundane efforts, but the damage had been done. Rayonans are all very anti-nuclear now, with rampant protests and strikes attempting to force Big Shirley into inactivity. But Ramrick Cross and his advisors all agree that Big Shirley will continue to operate with or without a mortal workforce. The designs of automatons from the workforce of the Zorgotha Megaminer are being replicated and put to work within the desolate, empty halls of Big Shirley. There is still need for caution, however. 33 separate attacks have been made by the children of Ragash in an attempt to cause another meltdown, though none have breached the gates.
I'm very intrigued by the for free aspect of the blueprint of this nuclear plant. I mean, nuclear energy is incredibly powerful, right? Is it that Ophiax is like, sure, I'll give you nuclear energy, and and the cost, the for free cost being nuclear energy's hazards in general, I'm not sure, but I find that part particularly kind of fun to think about. For day 282, the prompt was, what makes someone of the upper class in your world? What gets you there and keeps you there? What makes a noble, however they define that, a noble? And this comes from Maple Me in the Discord. Nugget writes, noble blood, an entry in Petrichor. Every noble is an aristocrat, but not every aristocrat is a nobleman. They share similarities, such as both being very class-conscious and part of the second estate. Aristocratic families tend to be in power through, well, already having power. Plenty of families in the second estate started as lawmen or bankers, or maybe they owned a lot of land or had a part in other extremely profitable industries. The nobles usually start the same. For example, the Vanes made many of Petrichor's laws in the early days, and the Lockharts provided much of the coal used to power the city before electricity. Though there is one very crucial difference that sets them apart from the rest of the second estate. The noble families specifically swear their loyalties and their blood to the church for services to the city and the gods. This is why the council is only made of noblemen specifically. They're the ones who were put in a blood oath to serve the city generations before they were even born. But blood dilutes. They've gotten sloppy over the centuries, but they still value every drop of their blood as if it were gold. Nobility is rare, after all. The church specifically seeks out nobility. It isn't something you can just request, and the bar is high. Most of the noble families still in power are the ancient bloodlines who gained noble status by helping to put the city together in the first place when it was founded. For day 283, the prompt was, describe a city in a unique location in your world. The Wanderer writes, Shalantir cities in the sky. I've regaled you with the hints of Shalantir in the past, but I have failed to deliver their full story, or at least a very short bit of it. I will tell you about their home and how it came about. They had their own world, and then spread out amongst the stars of the Aether. However, there was a war against them. It raged across creation and nearly destroyed everyone else in the crossfire, so the Belivore of the Elder Gods ended the war. He destroyed the Barkhill, they who had both started the war and turned themselves into weapons of war, and cast Shalantir's world out of the heavens and smote it upon Endrin's floor. But, because there was still innocence found there, he let them start again. And that is where they rebuilt their civilization. However, while they were cast onto the ground, their need for the skies could not be quenched, so they built floating islands, some massive in scale, and upon which they built their cities. Spiraling cathedrals of white stone and built into arches, glass as strong as steel, twisted into beautiful architecture, the Shalantir created a very beautiful place. They blended great structures with greenery, its places being indistinguishable whether they were on natural land or artificial. Birds often flew below their cities, building nests along the sides of their floating isles. All said and done, it was very safe, very beautiful, and to them it was home. But I will mention why those cities lie empty or sunken beneath the oceans. The Shalantians were powerful, physically strong, sure, but in magic they surpassed nearly all but the gods. As they grew, the gods feared that they would not be able to stop them, so they cast their floating isles from the skies. Agathon the smith reluctantly did so through tears. For the second time, Shalantir fell, but the capital was preserved. Kaelin, the queen of Shalantir, caught her city, sacrificing herself to save its memory. Cool. I like these floating cities. I'm trying to think. There was a property that had something like this that was super interesting, and I do not remember it. I'm sorry. For day 284, the final prompt in Shoutout Saturday number 27, the prompt was, how diverse is clothing in your world? Are there many ethnic traditions surrounding garb, or has it homogenized? Carhop writes, the uniform, another entry in Solitaire. 500 hours. The sun has yet to crest the horizon, despite beginning to tinge the sky in clouds, a dull, dusty navy. Steam rises from the Photon's standard issue mug, lazily waltzing through the crisp morning air. In another hour, Arne Dradus will storm into the cadet tent and rouse any stragglers from their beds with a shout, and the chaos of the day will ensue. The young people are still soft, barely cognizant of the threats facing Solitaire. They still whine and grumble about waking, still move without urgency, and worse yet, they're still loud as loud can be. Everything they do involves a level of volume that makes the Photon's good eye twitch. Sullivan, especially with his boisterous attitude and impulsive outbursts, elicits a heightened heart rate. A fluttering movement in his peripheral causes Dradus to reflexively tense up before catching his breath. He counts to 5 while inhaling, then to 10 while exhaling. It's just his service uniform, hung on the clothesline and blowing in the gentle breeze. He scans the surroundings, deliberate in noting everything he sees. There is a copse of vermithorns trees in the middle distance, a quad-winged littlebeak singing its song among the branches, and a burrowing on the hunt for a morning meal of berries and nuts, skittering around the carpet of dried burgundy thorns. No sun-drinkers could be seen, nor would they be able to get past the security measures of Camp Apolis without tripping several alarms. Nonetheless, Arne's milky left eye and the three-pronged scar that cover it ache. Arne's attention turns to himself. He notes how the rough-spun cotton undershirt and trunk he wears irritate his skin. His pajama pants are of the same make and just loose enough to not constantly brush against his calves and ankles. The fitted plain white shirt layered over his undershirt and the calf-length socks pulled over his pant legs help trap and redistribute his body heat with a weave of nanoreflectors and sensors which he notes would be more irritating than the itchy fabric of his underclothes. He is warm despite not wearing a coat, his cheeks and ears flushed. Perhaps it is also to the credit of the coffee in his mug, but Arne is nonetheless grateful. The Energy Council's Department of Textiles, who issued the same article of clothing to every citizen on the continent, had been quite pragmatic when designing them. Efficiency and reliability had been at their forefront, striving to use as little energy as possible in their making. For someone as Spartan as Arne Dradus, this was commendable. The simplicity and lack of choices made getting ready for his day all the easier. The young ones didn't seem to be as thrilled, often modifying their issued clothing with organic dyes and embroidery. Some even sewed fabric patches and emblems onto their clothing. Arne had been tempted to disallow these practices at first, but quickly realized the blow to morale that would be. So long as their uniforms remained unmodified, the Photon was content. He looks at his pocket watch. 0530. Arne stands from his chair and ducks into his command tent, but not before scanning the horizon once more. The sun has begun its rise, the dusty navy sky brightening to a lighter blue, while the scant clouds blossom in shades of pink and orange. He sighs and allows a rare smile to grace his lips. Perhaps today will be a better day. Very cool. Hopefully, Arne is. I didn't know if it was Arn or Arne, and so I went with one, just with my gut. And if that is incorrect, let me know, and I will fix that in the future, because this guy seems like to be an important character. The first 2 entries, at least that we have seen, have included him in a substantial amount. Very cool, though. I like this. You're great at describing clothing and environments, Carhop, so well done. Aris writes, the Rona/Ronashiro. The members of the Tahulio-Kodal race have a very long and intricate culture dating back a great many years, with many traditions upheld to this day. One such tradition is their traditional set of clothing called the Rona. Although it's hard to tell the difference between a male and female's Rona from an outsider's perspective, it's easy to tell as a Kodal. Ronashio are made by hand, woven expertly for wear by others of the race. Due to the 2 main types of Kodals, beast Kodals having no legs and impure having legs, though both having a body length of roughly 33 feet average, there are 4 main types of Ronashio made for the beast male-female and impure male-female. Ronashio are vibrantly colorful, multi-layered dresses with various layers of robes and bands wrapping around the Kodal's body, with the majority of the clothing being closer to the body of the Kodal, while some bands and robes bend farther down the length of their body. Traditionally, they are made with some layers of the fabric a solid color, and other layers woven in such a way the Kodal's scale pattern is visible underneath. The reason for this is because Kodals believe covering up their patterns, especially on the back, is a disgrace, so the Rona ensures there is a good balance of covered and uncovered. While not being specifically explicit, it's still clothing after all. Alongside the robes and bands of clothing holding the Rona's design, there is also a fair bit of metal bits and pieces built to keep it all together. It started off as silver for the main populace and gold for the higher-ups, but once the consensus got out into space, gold became common, causing gold to be used more in the general populace and a metal called zarnalum to be used for the higher-ups of the race. These metal bits and bombs are usually placed on the Rona to further hold it together in their day-to-day lives, especially if the Rona runs down the length of the body. A Kodal's Rona is meant to be with them for life. It starts off fairly small, but as they grow older, more pieces, strands, robes, wrappings, etc., is added to the Rona to make it more defined. Some Kodals have different Ronashio for different occasions, while others have different Ronashio because they look nice. To say simply, a Kodal takes pride in their appearance and wants their clothes to be beautiful. Otherwise, what's the point? These Kodal creatures, are they like giant snake things? The scales and stuff, I'm really curious about this homebrew race that you've got going on, Aris. Obviously, the clothing is very cool. I like the very flowy sound of this and the way in which it maybe kind of like creates patterns in relation to the scales and such, but I just don't know anything about the Kodal either, and they sound interesting. And hopefully, I'm pronouncing that at least close to how you envision it. And for our final submission for Shoutout Saturday number 27, Nugget writes, traditional clothing, an entry in Petrichor. Clothing in Petrichor always has one thing in mind above all else, keeping the wearer warm and dry. Before enchanted clothing became popularized, people tended to dress the old-fashioned way. Large, waterproof coats, softer insulating layers underneath, tall boots to keep the water out, etc. It's always been about fully covering clothing to keep water out and heat in, however that may be. Something interesting that comes from this is that, ironically enough, desert-like fashion is surprisingly common in Petrichor. As it turns out, clothing crafted to keep the sun off translates well to keeping off rain too, with scarves, cloaks, ponchos, etc. being just as common as raincoats. With the introduction of enchanted clothing, style began to shift slightly to those who could afford it. They could wear lighter layers of clothing without sacrificing their safety and could show off fashion that wouldn't survive the rain otherwise. The rich, in particular, began to adopt a very extravagant fashion sense, emphasizing just how much fabric they can afford and more ruffles than would ever be convenient in the rain. Just because they can. Most can't afford a full closet of enchanted clothing and still rely on traditional means of keeping rain off, although the Wuji and Regency aesthetics still trickle down with some alterations to account for the weather. Cool. I think we've gotten similar clothing entries before from Nugget. To be fair, Petrichor doesn't have a lot of cultural differences in clothing for that exact reason, and so we get kind of an interesting little subtler look at each kind of aspect of clothing each time we have a clothing prompt in Petrichor, which I think is kind of cool. And there you have it. That is Shoutout Saturday number 27. Thank you to all our wonderful submitters. I am back on the doing 2 weeks at once. I'm actually hopefully going to do this 2 weeks in a row to really get myself caught back up, and we will be sort of back on track very soon here. I've enjoyed this a lot, really getting back into just reading everybody's stuff. The move ending is very good for me. I'm getting things done finally that I want to be doing again, which is always a nice feeling. Now, if you want to support us, if you want to join in, if you want to take part in things, feel free to subscribe. Please come join the Discord, come hang out with us. If you want to see your own writing, like I said at the beginning, you can always be posting something for the build together. As long as it is recent within the weeks that I will be covering and you tag it Shoutout Saturday, I will read it here. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I hope you have a wonderful Saturday or whatever date it is that you're watching this. Goodbye.